you take the temperature of the narrative right now, if you take the temperature, if you watch TV right now and you watch all the shows on, and I have to watch them all, okay? So I peek at them at different levels. But you take a look at Fox News, you take a look at CNN, you take a look at MSNBC, many pundits at MSNBC, and you take a look at all these other stations, CBS, ABC. They are truly telling you that what occurred on Tuesday, on election day, was a split decision. Oh, they kept the Senate and they may have gained a voice or two. But let me tell you, folks, that is not the case, and we cannot fall for that at all. We cannot fall for the lie that somehow this was a split decision. We cannot fall for the lie that somehow, oh, half of one's, a half dozen of the other. We cannot fall for it, because what happens then is when legislation is put forth there, they're going to say, oh, we somehow have to go through some mythical middle. We have to look at the mythical middle. Well, Ari Melber did one of the best, and I'm going to play that in a minute. So get ready, folks. You're going to see a piece of video now that is going to blow your mind. The journalism that Ari Melber at MSNBC did to prepare this particular snippet. I cut some pieces out of it, or I cut it up, and I may break into it a few times. But this is an important piece that I'm going to show you, and I'm going to do this before I go into the blog of the week. I'm going to do this because, folks, this is something everybody has got to see, because most of the news has not been giving us the truth, or even if they've been giving us the truth, it's been slanted to some mythical middle. It has been slanted to make some people feel, okay, well, it wasn't a blowout on the left. They are so scared. Most Americans and most institutions are so scared of the left. In as much as most of what America wants are leftward policies, when asked them without giving them an ideological spin, that's what most want. So what I'm going to do is, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and play that. I want you to, folks, to listen to this keenly. Listen to what he's saying. Let's go.
Rejection of Trump broader than many D.C. pundits appear to realize. And this matters because the actual public support can shape what happens next. There was only one national race last night for the House where Americans in every state voted. The Senate, not a national race, most of its members not up for re-election. The states that did vote on senators have about 75% of the population. You see there, and overall, did you know that more people in those races backed Democrats by 15 points overall? It's the smaller states that went Republican that get the same number of senators under our Constitution. Now then, in the race that I mentioned, where every American can vote, the House, Dems winning decisively. At this hour, a 6% edge over Republicans. Now, when past presidents have lost the House, they admit it.
If you look at race by race, it was close. The cumulative effect, however, was not too close. It was a thumping. I said that the elections were close. The cumulative effect.
It's a thumping.
Thumping.
And
I'm not recommending for every future president that they take a shellacking like I did last night.
Trump refusing to do that, and he may keep lying about the results and using bluster to distract from this loss and trying to overwhelm the coverage of the Democratic victory with other moves like ousting his attorney general after the election. But that's Trump. What about everyone else, especially these self-declared experts on our elections? The fact is, this week, more Americans chose Democrats than Trump, just like they did in 2016, showing a consistent preference for Democrats and against Trump. This blue wave in the House was historic, and I don't mean historic as like a debatable adjective. I literally mean historic in the sense of history. Take a look at Dem results in the past 40 years. This is the number of seats they won in every race, when they won any seats. And right here, this is what they just won this week. You are looking at a projected 35 seats, the largest gain for Democrats in 4 decades, which is more seats than the so-called thumping in 2006. Headlines were blaring that that was a wave of voter unrest and Democrats wrested control from Republicans. It's more than any other election since the Democratic wave against Nixon, who was historically unpopular because of his criminal presidency. That is a big headline this week, even if some people don't want you to know it. And the D.C. pundits who underestimated Trump before he became president through the Electoral College, you may have noticed this. Now they're overestimating Trump. They're underestimating this blue wave. And pundits keep talking about this divided result. The Washington Post called this a split decision. That's one angle that Fox News has seized on.
It was not the blue wave that a lot of people predicted.
Big picture, David Gregory, the fact that there's this divided result.
You've got, divided government, which is a very American reality situation.
Voters were not divided this week.
I want to add something there because Ari Melber, the one thing you just said there is that, well, that was Fox News who kind of spun it differently. It was not just Fox News who spun it differently. It was just about every single network. I just wanted to break in there to make that little change to what Ari Melber said there. It was all the networks that did that, but let's continue.
Most chose Democrats. It's that simple. But D.C. cliches can overwhelm simple facts, like the cliche that American politics zigs and zags in presidential races. You've heard about that, the idea that our electorate is a kind of a presidential pendulum, and we hear so many declare America is divided and centrist.
America, the country, is as divided as it has been in 150 years since the Civil War.
Whatever happens, whoever wins, whatever the people want, I don't think they're going to get because people are so frustrated in this country.
But Americans have not been going back and forth when deciding which party should win the White House. Voters preferred a Democrat for president in 6 of the last 7 presidential races. Here's the popular vote margin in the 90s, big and blue with Clinton as president. In the 2000s, voters preferred Gore. Then Bush did win the popular vote in 2004. And voters preferred Obama twice in a row and preferred Clinton last election when Trump did win the Electoral College. You see what you had up on the screen with all that blue? That's not a zig and a zag. It's mostly zig. This fact is staring us in the face, even if it doesn't fit that D.C. pundit narrative. It's obviously also much bigger than Trump. When the American public votes for president, it's not a center-right country. More people pick Democrats most of the time. And in the legislative branch, the Senate's not a direct democracy. It is weighted towards small red states. Meanwhile, politicians have rigged the House. They use gerrymandering, so they pick the voters instead of the voters picking them. Remember when the electorate went peak Barack in 2012? Americans voted to re-elect him by about a 4-point margin, and they voted to back Democrats for Congress by about 1.2 points. But those rigged, gerrymandered districts overruled that big blue popular preference you just saw. And then the very politicians who rigged that outcome come out and they claim they won popular support. Cue the self-interested, swampy pablum about, yes, divided government.
The American people have spoken. They've re-elected President Obama, and they've again re-elected a Republican majority in the House of Representatives.
That was 2012, and the American people did speak. They said they wanted Democrats to run the House. Instead, they got Boehner. Now, none of this changes the practical fact that the GOP held the House in 2012 under the rules when they got fewer votes, or that Trump is president despite getting fewer votes. Any lawyer can tell you if you control the rules, you're more likely to win. But when all these pundits and experts march across your screen, they aren't talking about who won. We already know that. They are declaring what the people want, what you want as voters, and what has a mandate, and whether real America backs Trump or Clinton or Boehner or Obama, and they're shaping what this system we live in perceives as possible. So why do fact-free cliches about divided America endure? Well, a lot of people, including those of us in the media, we live inside the rules of our politics, and it gets uncomfortable for some when we have to admit that this system in our Constitution is not a democracy, that the person who comes in second can end up running the country, and the people who win more votes, millions more votes, they go out and give speeches and get lectured about how to handle their loss gracefully when they actually won more support from voters. And this gap between what Americans vote for and what the elected branches do, this goes beyond candidates. Take an example we all know about that's relevant tonight. 9 out of 10 Americans support gun background checks. The Senate rejects those checks because the Senate's not responsive to 9 out of 10 Americans. It's tilted towards tiny states. Now, when that happens as a reality, you don't stand back and say, well, I guess the American people don't want background checks after all. We must be a center-right, anti-background check nation. Golly. No. Obviously, the takeaway is the Senate does not reflect the public's view. It is blocking that. And if that's so clear, why do so many people act like Trump had more support in 2016 or Boehner's side won in 2012 or this week's giant blue wave, what you're looking at, a 40-year high, wasn't as big as it was? Well, I think partly because this is politics, so there are powerful agendas behind the propaganda. And second, it's human nature to want the plot to make sense. So Al Gore has to be a loser, even to many Democrats, because considering the opposite, that the wrong guy took charge and we're living in an alternate universe, that's too much for some people to bear. We are living right now through an era of tremendous civic strain. I think we have too much politics in the sense of endless spin and battle, and way too little democracy in the sense of the popular will shaping what our government actually does. That is an uncomfortable dynamic, to say the least, which is why when you bring up the popular vote, try it at a party. People end up fighting about whether Al Gore and Hillary Clinton were great candidates. Maybe they weren't. But that has nothing to do with the growing democracy deficit in our country, which is not about personalities. A system that repeatedly overrides the voter's preference, your voting preference, is likely to stoke division and eventually, if that continues, to undercut its own legitimacy. A big reason America is especially divided is that the voting opposition to Donald Trump was larger than the support for Donald Trump from his first day on the job. He entered the White House with the lowest support of the voting public of any president in history, a trend that continues on to this week with what we showed you tonight, a 40-year record blue wave in the House. Some of these factors are unlikely to change. The founders did deliberately make the Senate undemocratic. But some other factors have to change. If voters want the House of Representatives to be democratic and not be a rigged, gerrymandered public farce. And as with so many crises in the Trump era, the first step on all of this is getting our facts straight.
That was pretty evident. What that was some of the best written journalism I've seen on MSNBC, on any of these channels, because it put it all together. It put the picture perfectly so. So what I wanted to ask you guys to do, first of all, is if you're just joining us, please remember the only way we are going to get truth across is if we all make sure to make all these programs seen by many. So please go ahead and share this on your Facebook page, your Facebook wall, your Twitter, Tumblr, everywhere, because we have to get this information. But what the point of what he's saying is so true. The narrative defines what gets done. And right now, even as we've just had a monumental win, not only in the House of Representatives, but all down in policies. Like I said yesterday on my KPFT show on 90.1, KPFT 90.1 FM in Houston, like I said there, we won, meaning the progressives, the Democrats won so big in parlance of Donald Trump, so bigly. It is something that we should have been screaming out. But what occurred, and I'm going to say this again because there are new people that are coming in, and also new people that probably didn't hear the show yesterday or the day before. The media decided that there were going to be 4 stars that were going to determine the bellwether: Stacey Adams, Bill Nelson, Andrew Gillum, and Beto O'Rourke. And so far, Beto O'Rourke has lost, but we are not sure about the other 3 because there's a whole lot of machination and voter fraud, not voter fraud, but probably voter detention. All of that's going on, so we don't know about the outcomes. But let's assume all 4 of those were lost. The reality is that what we won was so much bigger, and I gave the example of just Harris County, the county where I reside, where we got taken over, where the progressives, Democrats, took over the entire slate, all the judges, all the at-large positions, except for 1 or 2, or the little quantity. But the reality, it was a sweep. It was a wipeout.